I want to introduce Councilmember Carl Morehouse from the city of San Buenaventura. He'll be moderating our next panel that's going to explore the role of policy in bolstering local food systems. Councilmember Morehouse is also the current president of the Southern California Association of Governments, and he has also served on the San Buenaventura City Council since 1999 and served as deputy mayor of the city from 2003 to 2005, and he was mayor from 2005 to 2007. I will let Councilmember Morehouse take it from here and introduce you to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and certainly it's a pleasure to be here. As he gave you a little background about me, I am an urban planner by training. I work for the County of Ventura, which we're famous for ag and open space. Anybody know the SOAR ordinances? That happened in my county, and I worked there for 20 years. Anybody, hands go up if I mention the name Bill Fulton. Somebody snagged me coming in. Only one or two. Just set the record straight. I was elected before Bill. I was mayor before Bill, and I've stayed after Bill got off the council. Okay, we got that straight. I know Bill taught here, so. And also by way of background, I'm not a native Californian. I'm actually a native Hoosier. My undergraduate's out of Purdue, but I'm not an Aggie. I spent a lot of time on my father's and grandfather's farm, however, and my master's is out of IU. I'm here by way, however, though, as both president of SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, and as a planner, in part because last year at the State American Planning Association conference, which was held in Visalia, there was an interesting panel that really caught my attention, and it had to deal with three aspects of food. And the two that really pricked up my ears were the unavailability of good, healthy food to the very people who pick it. I've been very involved with farm worker housing in Ventura County, and the examples were shown in both the Central Valley and the Coachella Valley about the people who keep our food prices so darn low, but they don't have access to good, available, healthy food themselves. And the second one had to do with urban deserts and the availability for food for many parts of this greater Los Angeles area and the communities that are impacted that don't have anything in the way of good, fresh vegetables, and those are all tied very much to health issues. So somehow or another, that conversation drug me into here today, and I'm happy to be here because it sounds like a very interesting panel ahead of us. We have three participants today, Claire Fox, Kim Kessler, and Mark Glassick, and I'm going to give each one of them about 2 minutes to give you a little bit of their background. So I'll start with Kim.
Thank you so much. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Thank you for the introduction and to Seedstock for having us. I am the Policy and Special Programs Director at the Resnick Program for Food Law and Policy at the law school, which is about 1 year old, and it's very exciting because it's one of the first major programs at a law school focusing on the issues of the food system. Our goal there is to identify and advance solutions to the problems of the modern food system, and particularly law and policy solutions. Prior to that, I was the food policy coordinator for the Bloomberg administration in New York City, where I worked with our city agencies to advance our overall food policy goals, which involved certainly issues of healthy food access, solving food security issues, and promoting a more sustainable food system throughout the city. And during that time, I had the opportunity to work with a number of other peer cities, including Los Angeles, under then Mayor Villagrosa, and was part of a group that was part of the first U.S. Conference of Mayors Food Policy Task Force. And so I think that what I saw during my time in New York City government was this incredible amount of attention that was being played at the local level to food policy challenges. And I think what's really exciting about this conversation that this panel is going to have is that cities really have been an engine of innovation, cities and localities in this space. And I think that's because they are on the front lines of dealing with the downstream negative consequences of food system issues. So the rates of obesity and diet-related disease, the issues of poverty and attendant food insecurity, the lost opportunities around local economic impacts of more robust food system development. And so cities have had the opportunity to work closely with both see the challenges close up, but then also a lot of the solutions that are coming from civil society, NGOs, community-based organizations, and in some cases have those become part of policy changes. So cities have tools from their land use and urban agriculture, which I know we're going to talk about, certainly procurement in terms of government procurement. When I was in New York, we were one of the first cities to adopt a policy to encourage local procurement through our city agencies. Investment into creating market access for local and regional projects through food distribution systems. There's a lot that can be done at the city level to create food system change. And I think that cities have been demonstrating that, are going to continue to do that. So I'm excited to talk about with Claire and Mark what can be done.
Claire.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claire Fox, and I am the Director of Policy and Innovation for the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. And the LA Food Policy Council is, I think, an example of the kind of tools that Kim is talking about in terms of what cities can do to engage large swaths of diverse stakeholders to come together to look at the entire local food system and think systemically and holistically and come up, hopefully, with holistic policy solutions that address multiple issues at once. So we, as an organization, we're an independent nonprofit that was created by the City of Los Angeles through the Villaraigosa administration in 2010 and designed to be a collective impact organization. So the LA Food Policy Council, like many other food policy councils across the country, I think there's 300 or so now. It's really taken off in the last decade or so, this formation. The purpose is to bring together representatives and leaders and stakeholders from every sector of the food system. So every activity that we think of that makes up the food system, everything from production through distribution, retail, and even waste, representing different issue areas that we know are pressing and urgent in our communities, both urban and rural, whether it's hunger or the quality of work for food workers, or urban agriculture, sustainability, and getting everyone in the room talking to each other, getting that 360 view, and setting a vision and a direction. And so the Food Policy Council came about from a founding vision policy document called the Good Food for All Agenda, because our purpose and our goal is that we want to see Southern California be a good food region for all communities. And we define good food as healthy, affordable and accessible, sustainable and fair. And we really hold all those value categories at once. And that makes for really interesting conversations about policy and how we don't allow ourselves to fall into siloed thinking, but rather, stay committed to every single value. And I think one of the best examples of that I could talk about a little bit later is our good food purchasing policy. It's a procurement policy. We've already heard today with the previous panel about the importance of institutional demand and institutional procurement in shaping the local market. We have a policy like that here in LA, and it's not widely known or understood. So I'll talk about it in a minute, but I think it's a great example.
Don't steal my questions, please.
Yeah, it's right, exactly. But I think it's a great example of holistic and collaborative policy development, which is the purpose of the Food Policy Council. I'll just leave it at that.
Mark.
Great. Good morning. Is this one working? Yep. Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Glassick, and I am the Director of Special Projects at the LA Neighborhood Land Trust. The Land Trust is a nonprofit organization that works to acquire, develop, and steward vacant land and put it back into the commons. Since 2005, we've developed about 18 projects throughout LA County and LA City, and we currently have 11 projects in our pipeline. That ranges everywhere from a quarter-acre tot lot community garden all the way up to an 8.5-acre brownfield property. My job at the Land Trust is essentially to direct a team of landscape architects, farmers, researchers, and stewards in identifying land, programming land, and again, putting it back into the commons. We work exclusively in low-income communities of color throughout LA County, so our approach is very much from an equity, social justice, and environmental justice angle. I'm a very proud member of the LA Food Policy Council's Urban Ag Working Group, which I feel is definitely at the forefront of policy change within LA and within the region. So I'm very excited to be here to talk about policy. Just briefly, I first got exposed to agriculture as a Peace Corps volunteer in Southwest Uganda, where I learned two things. Number one, never stare a goat in the eyes for too long. It gets a little freaky. And number two is that I am not well positioned to be an expert farmer in my role. And many folks' role should be looking at what the policy barriers are out there and what is stopping people from planting a carrot wherever they want, whenever they want, however they want. And that's what really fascinates me about policy, because it's just too darn difficult to do that in LA right now. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Very good. As you can see, we've got quite a diverse panel up here and some perspectives to go through. So I'll begin with you've all alluded to this, what current government policies are most beneficial to the growth of a robust local food market? And we can just go down the line, Kim, if you'd like to respond.
Sure. I think we had a little bit of a pre-panel conversation about, well, what does local mean in this context? And I think if you're thinking about from a regional perspective, both in city and out of city, the policy solutions that come to the fore are certainly urban agriculture growing in city, and there are different places where that makes more sense or is going to have more of a large-scale impact than others. Procurement, which we've touched on, and is something that is being driven now more and more so. You see this in school procurement initiatives. You see this in some city procurement initiatives. I'm excited for Claire to talk more about the Good Food Purchasing Pledge. I didn't mention I'm also on the leadership board of the Los Angeles Food Policy Council, and the Good Food Purchasing Pledge is a really incredible development. And then in New York City, again, we also adopted, New York City purchases a very significant number of meals, approximately 250 million meals a year that it serves to its city residents through schools, daycares, homeless shelters, prisons, and adopted procurement policies that apply to both nutrition standards and then subsequently policies to encourage city agencies to do more local procurement. This is a really important driver of developing a local food system economy. And so that's a lever that more and more cities are beginning to recognize that they can harness to drive supply chain to help solve distribution issues. And that the Good Food Purchasing Pledge, again, is a great example of. The third opportunity, I think, is really creating urban-rural linkages that happen at the consumer level. So this is farmers markets, CSAs, other kinds of retail solutions, and they have a really important impact because that is a historic, traditional connection between city dwellers and their rural neighbors that when it is happening all across your city at a farmer's market every day of the week or every weekend, creates a real understanding of this symbiosis. And even if it's not where we're going to source 100% of our food, it is driving city consumers' understanding of this relationship and this give and take to understand where your food comes from, for farmers to understand the neighborhoods that they're serving and the needs of the neighborhoods that they're serving. And there are many stories of farmers changing what they're growing, recognizing the different ethnic communities in certain farmers markets and meeting demands of the people who are at their farmers markets. And there's a lot that can be done at the city policy level to support that, whether it's reducing permitting fees for farmers markets, creating parking solutions for farmers. At least that was a big issue in New York. I don't know if it's as much of an issue in LA. And then obviously also these incentive programs that a number of cities have, whether they're city-led or NGO-led, to provide funding to increase the purchasing power of low-income residents at farmers markets. And that is the solution that not only bolsters their own purchasing power to create the amount of food that they can take home to feed their families, but also makes those markets more viable and attractive for farmers to sell at in low-income neighborhoods. And that was a very successful strategy in New York, where we had a huge increase in farmers markets between the years of 2006 and 2014, going from something like 65 markets to over 140.
Claire, policies.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's hot.
Wait, it's on. It's on, right? Oh, okay.
Close to it. That's
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the Good Food Purchasing Policy because I really do feel that it has the potential and is a game-changing policy. But it's one of those things that, you know, when you do this sort of work and you're in the world of food policy, you know, it's easy. It's all too easy to be a little wonky. So we're getting better at telling this story and how really cool it actually is because it was already passed 2 years ago. The city of LA adopted this Good Food Purchasing Policy. It's a procurement policy. Shortly after the city adopted it, LAUSD, the second largest school district in the country, also adopted it. And what it does is it essentially directs the food purchasing power of those institutions, and the city of LA does actually buy food itself through its rec and parks and convention center, and even DWP buys food, obviously for its cafeteria, the zoos, and it directs that purchasing power towards good food. And the policy was written in a way that it has 5 value categories: local, sustainable, healthy, fair, and humane. And the last two, the fair category, has to do with a valued workforce. So essentially, what that means is that the institution that's buying this food, their food dollars are going towards companies that treat their workers right. The humane category has to do with animal welfare. And both of those categories were, as far as we know, especially the labor piece, very unique to a food procurement policy. A lot of times we'll see a sustainable food purchasing policy or a healthy food purchasing policy. Well, we said we want it all. And the reason that happened was because there was a coalition, it was actually a working group. Mark mentioned the Urban Ag Working Group. This was a procurement working group. And there were at the table labor, environmentalists, animal rights activists, public health, and businesses that are distributors and other entities that are experts in procurement. And what happened was a really beautiful thing, is that at a certain point in time they said, are we asking for too much here? This is a little crazy. Can we really ask for all 5 of those categories in this policy? And because they worked together so well and built that relationship of trust, it facilitated a sense of solidarity, where at a certain point in time they said, it's all of us or none of us. We're moving forward together. We're not going to allow your issue to get taken off the table. And the crazy thing about it is that it worked. And so I love to lift that up, because I think we should be ambitious with what we ask for in terms of policy and systems change and not sell ourselves short. If we want to see healthy food, but we also want to see support for local mid-size farmers, if we also want to support sustainable growing practices and the workers who are out in the fields, then we should ask for all of that. And just in terms of the impact, if you think about LAUSD, they serve 650,000 meals a day, and their food budget is somewhere in the range of $140 million. So it's a lot. It's quite a bit of money. The LAUSD is actually the biggest food purchaser in the entire city of LA. So them making this commitment and moving in this direction, what it does is it sends out market signals. We heard from AG earlier on the previous panel about the need to have these sort of institutional demand that can stabilize businesses like his. So it sends out market signals to those sustainable high road growers that they have business available and ready for them in the city of LA.
Mark, what current government policy is most beneficial in your?
Sure. It's tough a little bit. It's tough being at the end of this panel.
We'll turn it around in a second.
I will start by saying that the good news is that there is wind in our sails. We definitely have victories, and those victories are starting to stack on top of each other, and we see the momentum and the pace of momentum increasing over time, which I think is a huge success and testament to the collective impact of the Food Policy Council and people like we're doing in this room today coming together to talk about policy and what it means on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to run through some opportunities that I feel like are especially interesting and intriguing, and I would love for us to talk about this later in the day. One is AB 551, the Urban Agricultural Incentive Zones Act. How many people have heard about AB 551? So that's awesome. That's really good. It's good when people can recall the law based on the law number. That's usually a good sign. So AB 551 is state law that allows cities and counties to pass an ordinance to create a tax incentive for private landowners that own vacant land anywhere from 1/10 of an acre in size to 3 acres in size. What it allows owners to do is essentially lease that land out to a urban agricultural enterprise, whether public or private, for use over 5 years, and they get all of their property tax they don't have to pay property tax for 5 years. So it's a great way to take away the cost of land for entrepreneurs and people wishing to start enterprises within the county. And it also adds a little bit of security in terms of land tenure, since there is a 5-year agreement. So it's a great potential that I know the Food Policy Council has been championing. Based on our latest estimates, there's about 8,500 vacant lots in the city of Los Angeles alone that could apply for this ordinance when passed, if passed, by LA City and LA County. So it represents a huge opportunity in terms of land and land access. Another thing, and thank you, Claire, for checking me on the wonkiness, because it gets a little wonky here around just planning and zoning. there are documents in LA City that really determine what we can do and where we can do it. And those are the community plans, the general plan, and the zoning code. Those are very arcane documents that kind of exist in the backlogs of City Hall, and they can be difficult for community members wishing to plant food to understand. Right now, the city is in a process of updating many of those community plans, and from what we've seen, urban agriculture has been a featured component in a lot of those updates. So we have great momentum in that regard. LA City is also updating its zoning code, which is called Recode LA, which is a community process that people can comment on, participate in, which is another opportunity for us to look about urban agriculture and making that easy for growers and distributors of healthy food. That is a good model for the other 87 cities in LA County to look after. It's very difficult to know, comparing city to cities and cities to unincorporated areas. UCLA did a great report last year or 2 years ago that actually inventoried all of the urban ag zones within LA County. It's a great resource for all of us. It's called Cultivate LA. Thanks. And then the last thing, just looking nationally, which I think is a great model for LA, is work coming out of Philadelphia as it pertains to vacant land and accessing vacant land. Philadelphia in the city, which is a smaller city than LA, has 41,000 vacant lots and buildings. By comparison, LA City has about 21,000 vacant lots based on our best estimates. What Philadelphia has done is that they have consolidated the process for identification and sale of those vacant lots into one point of contact. The difficulty in LA has been that land that's owned by the city depends on which department owns it, and there are many, many different departments, all with their own unique process, all with their own unique agreements, all with their own different auction process, and it's extremely difficult for people to plug into, not to mention to stay on that road for 3, 4, 5 years, which how long it usually takes. So Philadelphia has consolidated that into one process and has incorporated a lot of features of public participation to determine what actually is going on those vacant pieces of property. So the community actually has an active voice at the table to say, you know what, we're sick and tired of check cashing liquor stores and fast food. Let's talk about a community garden. And that's a process that Philadelphia has set up for that I think, and I think others think, is a great model for LA.
I'll reverse the order. You're kind of on a roll. I don't want to stop you. The next question really is one of current government policies that pose the greatest challenges to the development of local food systems. I think you were starting down that path with zoning. I can tell you as a planner who spent 20 years implementing zoning ordinances and writing them, the difficulty of that. In Ventura, we just recently annexed an unincorporated area, and the first question out of everybody's mouth was, can I keep my chickens? So you want to address that, and I presume we're not just talking green vegetable matter. We are talking about fresh eggs and things like that as part of what we're doing. So you want to address further some of the obstacles, the greatest challenges to the development of these systems?
Sure. So quickly, some of the challenges around zoning is that it's not exactly clear which uses are acceptable on certain zones. And that is something that I feel like LA City is trying to clarify in terms of the exact, the chickens, the goats, the carrots, the vegetables, where those can be placed and where they cannot. There's still a lot of ambiguity in the code. In terms of greatest challenges to policy, I think it's really around, there's a lot of what there in terms of what challenges there are, but to me a great challenge and something that we have to be mindful of is how it's being processed and how we are developing policy. I think there are great policies on the books throughout LA County. You can go to City Hall and dust off the 40-year-old open space plan to see that it says in the LA County Code that we should be placing green spaces in low-income areas of color first. They deserve the priority. However, it's really the implementation that's lost, and that's really where a lot of our focus needs to be directed to make sure that all this great policy that we're proposing is getting staffed, is getting funded, and attention remains to be given. 3 challenges that I also want to talk about, especially as it pertains to urban agriculture, is displacement, blight, and water, and how those are huge issues that we all need to think about in developing projects and developing policy. In terms of displacement, we often treat people as movable objects and land as immovable market commodities. And too often, we see that communities are displaced as a result of very well-meaning policy. However, when we do that, we are just reinventing the wheel every few years because we see that all of the great mission that we set out to, we're not able to meet it. In terms of blight, blight has been a tool that has been placed on communities from outsiders really to inflict policy on communities. Someone by the name of Amy Laura Khan, again from Philadelphia, said, "Too often we cut off the limb to save the body when it comes to blight, but we don't give much thought to the healing or how we dispose of the limb." So we really need to think about when we are assigning blight to a vacant lot, what happens after that, and what's the process where the community can be at the table to determine what is on that parcel. Finally, water. We are headed for a future that is drier and hotter, and water is going to continue to be a precious, precious resource, and it takes water to grow food. But those don't necessarily have to be at odds with each other. I mean, there's no greater utility of water than to feed living things. So I think when we're talking about saving water, we should also be thinking about stormwater capture and how we can utilize the water when it rains, if it ever rains, before we limit our opportunities around urban agriculture. I think there's no greater example of these three challenges than Detroit. Right now we see hundreds and thousands of acres being sold off to the highest bidder under the guise of emergency management, and that's a really pressing challenge that I think cities are a lot closer to than they appear to be, and it's something that I think we need to be mindful of going forward.
Where are your thoughts on policies that provide great challenges?
Okay. Yeah, when I think about challenges and obstacles presented by policy, a couple things come to mind. One is, and Mark touched on it, but the lack of clarity or lack of regulation can give rise to problems. And I know an earlier panelist, Farmer, was saying, I don't like or appreciate regulation, but sometimes when there's a vacuum of information, clarity, or regulation, things can go awry. And an example of this that impacts the food world, but seemingly not at first, is that recently, in the last year, the city of Los Angeles, after a 5-year journey of advocates working, fighting and then collaborating with city departments, has actually revised completely the way that waste hauling happens in the city of Los Angeles. So the way that it was before, it was really kind of the wild, wild west. There was all these different haulers and collectors going after different kinds of business in the city of LA. That was creating a lot of congested truck traffic, especially in low-income communities, polluting the air. And of course, in terms of the end use, we were not moving the needle towards zero waste and real diversion from landfills. And so what they did is this year they adopted a new system. And it's an exclusive franchise agreement system where they divided the city of LA into 11 zones. And now the haulers have to compete for an exclusive franchise contract for zones, and they can contract for up to 8 zones. And what this does, it allowed the city and people who care about the environment and people who care about workers in the waste hauling industry to set high standards. Again, ask for what we want, be ambitious. And what does this have to do with food? Well, what it has to do with food is that 1/3 of our municipal waste stream is made up of organic matter, which is mostly food. So for people who care about feeding the hungry, for people who care about expanding access to healthy food, the fact that tons of food is going to our landfills and then emitting methane gases into the environment, causing pollution, affecting climate change, is just egregious, and we could do better. And so with this new system, it allowed, and having some regulation and clarity in place, the city said, listen, haulers, here's what we want. We're going for the gold standard. And if you can meet us here, you get a 10-year contract. So, it gives to the industry some level of assurance of, business in the city of LA, which is a big deal. But it also provides a mechanism to reach, and in our case, 90% diversion from landfills. And inevitably, what that leads to is increased recycling of organic and food waste, which inevitably will lead to opening up new business and market opportunities on the upcycle end. So converting what once was just going to a landfill as trash, food trash, ensuring that it gets composted and creating quality compost supplies for our local growers, or livestock feed, or using an anaerobic digester to create energy. So giving a second and third life to the trash that actually is a precious resource that, first and foremost, ideally we're reducing the amount of food that's going to waste in the first place. But this policy will really create a lot of opportunities around compost and food waste recycling that will hopefully give rise to new local food businesses as well. And if you're really interested in this topic, we're having a Food Policy Council network meeting and panel discussion next Wednesday night. And you could get information from our listserv if you sign up online.
Kim, particularly from your East Coast experience, what do you see as government policies posing challenges?
I'm actually going to mention a couple of things just more generally. I think one of the biggest challenges is that local and regional food, and this may be more true in the East Coast actually, where we have different seasonality concerns than here, and different availability of local food, but it's generally more expensive. It's often more expensive.
We're talking about, and since you're just down the road in TO, you're up in Ventura, we're talking about ripping out lawns. And I haven't walked the walk yet myself. I'm letting mine die, but I haven't gotten the conversion yet. And then other people going to actually ocean-friendly gardens and using that. But as you also are probably familiar, in my city, we do have a waste hauler that has been leading edge in getting the green waste and the food compostables. And they've had a spin-off business, Agriman, who is making fantastic, fantastic stuff for soil amendments. And that's going to be part of the key, too, to all this soil to make it more effective. So you had a quick statement. I'm just keeping an eye on the time.
Okay. Basically, my statement is biochar.
It's what?
Carbon or charcoal suitable for soil. Cuts our water usage, cuts our fertilizer input, builds soil fertility, and those are interested, sequesters carbon 3 to 1 negative. Every pound of char we put in the ground, we sequester 3 pounds of carbon from the atmosphere. But most of all, we really can build soil fertility. The Earth is putting the carbon back for a billion years through natural fires and other processes. We want to continue that and really expand out the use of biochar, because I work in community gardens all over the Southland, making biochar, donating biochar. I have the Southern California Biochar Initiative, a nonprofit, just for that purpose of educating the community, and I'm willing to talk to anybody who's interested in finding out more about it. So though I am a businessman in the biochar business, I'm very dedicated to the expansion of the knowledge and the use and the ability for people to do biochar on their own. Thank you.
Talk to this man after the conference. Good.
It's making compost. Proliferating life in the most powerful form of returning vitality to the skin of the earth.
Using biochar and compost is the most ideal way of using biochar. Well, that's for another subject, though. Thank you.
Good. The other side of the room for a question.
Oh, hi. I'm Lucia. My question is in relation to state policy that's coming down and how it's impacting on a local level. And specifically, is anyone in the panel familiar with the peer report that just came out?
Only through you.
Yeah.
Will you explain it?
So there's 2 points. It's the peer report, and since we're talking about code, Mark, AB 2470. That's something that just came down from Governor Brown's office, and I'll explain. First, AB 2470, from what I understand it, California can no longer have GMO-free zones, but according to Governor Brown, it signed into law a new section in California Food and Ag Code, Section 52334, which states notwithstanding any other law or on or after January 1st, 2015, a city, county, or district, including a charter county, shall not adopt and or enforce any ordinance that regulates plants, foods, or crops without the approval of the Secretary of Food and Ag. So that I see as for me, a huge problem in relation to policy regarding pesticides and what we just passed. Well, we haven't passed it officially in Los Angeles, GMO-free zone, so that could be problematic. The peer report, it's the Pest Environmental Impact Report, it's PIER. And essentially, that's allowing, again, the food and ag to indiscriminately spray pesticide without public approval anywhere in our communities. So public comment was deadline for October 31st, which was kind of convenient for our elections, right before elections. So really, lawmakers weren't even aware of it. A lot of policymakers on the local level, as I am witnessing, weren't really aware of it. So I'm talking about it now because I find it to be really pressing for folks that are in local areas that are growing their own food, if it's backyard gardening or your local farmers. So I find the regulation of pesticide as a problem, as an enormous challenge.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm getting to it. So thank you. So my question is, how are we going to deal with those issues coming down on a state level that's impacting on a local level? See how quick my question was? I had to preface it, so thank you for that.
Anybody got any thoughts?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, my understanding is both happened really quickly, and yeah, I mean, I got an email about this through one of the council offices,
Right, because
like
I contacted
days
them.
before the public comment needed to come in, and same with the 2470 that happened, and the people who on a city of LA level were moving forward this GMO-free zone were completely caught off guard. It happened very quickly, and I think it really speaks to the need for regional coordination and statewide coordination. And there is a body, the California Food Policy Council, that is a council of councils. And every year I see how we're moving towards better coordination. And really, I think the ultimate goal is that the California Food Policy Council can serve as sort of the voice of these different network alliances, food system alliances, networks, and councils across the state in Sacramento. And so hopefully obviously there's always more work to be done. There's always more ways, more conversations that can be had and ways to weigh in and shape things. But I guess that's my response to that is the importance of being, and Kim mentioned this too, I mean, the food system doesn't end at the city of LA or the county of LA boundaries where there's so much interdependency. But it is a challenge. It's that same challenge of lack of information, lack of clarity, and the need to better coordinate.
I'd say that you're headed in the right direction by doing things like this, because you need a group that's going to monitor and needs a broader organization. So I'm sorry for the time.
No, it's okay. And I'll just say the moms advocating for sustainability are folks in Northern California that are really at the forefront of this issue. So I would advocate to go to their website. It's Moms Advocating Sustainability, and they're really talking about these issues. So
we got to get past our north-south split, don't we? Combine forces. Over at this end.
I have a related question about how well, if at all, you're tracking state policy. I work on climate change and agriculture policy with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. We're a coalition of sustainable and organic ag organizations, and there's a lot happening at the state level, as you're probably aware, on groundwater management that's going to have to be implemented at the local level. There's the water bond that just passed. That's going to have local implications. There's AB 32 and its various programs, cap and trade being the one we focus most on. There's money coming down the pipe for farmland conservation because of the climate benefits. So my question to you at the local level is how well you're tracking it, whether you see opportunities, there certainly are some there. There's a whole chunk of money that's going to be set aside for disadvantaged communities, urban forestry. I'm curious about whether that's sort of playing out in your worlds.
Thoughts?
I'll just say that it's very difficult to track. I mean, there's a lot going on at the City Council, County Board of Supervisors, Sacramento, Washington, D.C. Speaking on behalf of a nonprofit organization, capacity is always an issue for us, and the ability to monitor bills through a very difficult and winding and sometimes super fast, sometimes super slow process is very difficult. We tend to rely on these councils for information and our network of experts to inform us when they feel like we should be aware of something. But definitely on the state level, the cap and trade funds are a fantastic potential resource for this work going forward. You mentioned the urban forestry program. That's something that we've definitely been looking into. On the federal level, I think we're going to see some impacts from the recent shift, and I think that's going to impact funding from USDA, CDC, and the ability to fund a lot of the great work that's going on currently.
Sir.
Just a quick question. I'm Peter Groupstein. I'm an investor and board member of a company called Bright Farms, which does protected agriculture in urban areas. We've grown dramatically from a revenue perspective, potentially, but the biggest problem we have is zoning. Getting our sites, and we spend way too much time in inner city Washington or Philadelphia. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can make zoning easier. And the second, which I think is a major issue nationwide, which would be interesting to see how the cities address, is labor. The fair labor side is huge. We do have sort of the new Jim Crow of this generation is ex-cons. We do need to figure out how to get them to work. Agriculture is a great way to do it. So I'd love to understand your thoughts on training and labor at the city level.
I think I'd go, Kim or Mark, you want to try responses to that?
Well, I'll say one thing about zoning, just in general, that the experience that you're talking about is one that is business friendliness of cities. I think it goes to a broader issue about business friendliness of cities, and it's certainly something I can say in New York, come up across a variety of different areas and a huge effort for the city to try and be business friendly, particularly to innovative types of businesses. This is also a topic that is of interest for programs that are trying to attract supermarket or healthy retail development to low-income communities. We're trying to change zoning policies to make it more attractive because it's in sync with other types of food policy goals. But even with zoning incentives in New York's case and financial incentives that were put into place to bring development into low-income areas, there's still a huge amount of permitting issues, a huge amount. I mean, we actually, tallied this, and it was like, I don't remember the number, but it was definitely in the tens of different types of permits that were needed for.
We gave up a project in Brooklyn after two and a half years.
I remember that. I think I remember that project being at least announced or pursued. So I guess I would say that I don't know how hopeful my answer is, but to say that cities really work on this because they want to pull these kinds of investments in, and so it's never quite as fast as private sector wants it to be, especially for these kinds of transformational projects. But just to continue to try and find your allies in city government is what you need to do to try and help drive along the process changes that are going to make it possible.
For a corporation, that's easier, but for individuals trying to navigate it, it'd be wonderful if there was sort of a website saying this is how you go. I can't imagine.
So I think that this is actually there's a broader call for that across in general around food system issues. So I know that in the new plan, the Plan for Healthy LA, there's a call for and proposal for positions that are dedicated to helping people navigate resources and permitting, and particularly in urban agriculture as well. And a number of cities have designated that urban agriculture. At least I'm aware of a couple that have designated sort of an urban agriculture coordinator to help people address the issue that Mark was talking about, where land holding decisions are being made in different city agency bases. So it's basically, like many things, kind of inching towards a more streamlined process, and it's something I think that cities really want to do. It's just competing with all the other things that they have that they're trying to do.
And I think that to a certain degree, the zoning code and other city codes are always going to be behind innovation, and it's always going to be catching up to that. I think something that would be very helpful to your point, Peter, is our ability to document that process and the pathway to entitling these projects. Oftentimes, I mean, from the land trust perspective, it's sometimes it seems like it's more difficult to entitle a half-acre community garden than it is a 40-story apartment building, and it shouldn't be that way. But something that we have found very successful is not only building capacity in ourselves to understand the city pathway to developing these process, but also building capacity in these different departments that may have never done a project like this before, that internally are huge champions of this work. They've just never done it before. So, you know, keeping track of this and documenting it as much as possible is very helpful, and sharing that in an open source format.
Thank you.
Well, we are the only thing standing between you and, ironically, lunch. Speaking of food. Let me give some summation thoughts real quickly, though. As a council member in Ventura, I sit on the League of California Cities Board of Directors. That represents the 482 cities of the state. There are, of course, 58 counties. In the Skag region alone, we represent 191 cities, 6 counties, 39,000 square miles, 18 million people, and the diversity of Big Bear down to Calexico, and from Blythe all the way to Santa Monica. There's a lot of opinions in between there, and I can tell you as an elected official, the mantra at the League of California Cities is local control. So there's not going to be one size that fits all. That's a clarity. The other is tracking bills, and I don't care which organization I've been in, whether it's the Local Agency Formation Commission, the LAFCO, state LAFCOs, whether it's APA, any of those organizations, we have a hard time watching what the legislature is doing too. So for the average layperson, unless you've got monitors and telling you what these bills are doing, and we're analyzing them oftentimes from various angles of land use, then the implications. So it's going to take a watchdog group like yourselves to make sure that something is not happening that is contrary to what you're trying to achieve. And then the last thing is clearly, and I live with this all the time as a local elected official, you're going to have to make sure that you tailor make this for neighborhoods. Not only for the community, there's community cultures. Obviously, Beverly Hills and Brentwood are going to have different attitudes about chickens than other parts of the region. But those fights even break down in my neighborhoods, and there's some who want their residential R1 zones, and they've spent a lot of money on their house, and they don't want anything like that. And others who are a little more around the fringy rural areas, and they kind of like it like that, and they'd like to continue. So when you're tailoring some of this stuff or promoting this, don't become a purist. Make sure that you're trying to be sensitive to people and their concerns about their property values and what's going to happen. And finally, there's a silos issue, and that goes on through every issue we have in this state. That we have different departments with different missions, and when those are then, remember, keep in mind that counties are subunits of state government. So even things like the county health department, which has certain missions, and building and safety types, which have certain missions from planning, they sometimes get stuck on their mission and they don't interact as well as they could. And that's just, you got to figure out how, the gentleman was suggesting over here, to wend your way through the process, and someday we'll build an app for that too, I suppose, right? So with that, I thank you all for your attentiveness. I thank the panelists for participating. I've learned a lot. Hopefully you have as well, and you will walk away from this conference with a whole lot more knowledge. Thank you.